Doctors tell us that people will overcome unthinkable hardships, all kinds of experiences, because they have a will to live, a reason to live. They don't give up. People have survived concentration camps, and you may not believe this. They survived concentration camps because they started to read a book when the SS picked them up, and they never finished it. They wanted to survive so they could finish reading a book. Yes, that's how badly they wanted to read the book. They have survived because they wanted to see children, wife, or husband. Overwhelming driving urges kept them going when everybody else might have thought it was helpless or hopeless to do so. People have lost arms, legs, sight, hearing, speech, living stumps. And yet they have triumphed over all kinds of obstacles because they had a will to live. They never said die. They never lost heart, but pressed forward until they finally reached their goal. I don't know how many of you read in that Reader's Digest the little story about the little girl that loved to run. 8 years old, she loved to run and jump. Parents were just in love with her. They thought it was the most beautiful thing. And of course, to see a child run is beautiful. And one day, she woke up. She had polio from her waist down, paralyzed. Doctors said, "You're never going to walk again." Everybody seemed to believe this but the little girl. The little girl loved to walk. She loved to run. And what happened to her? She dragged that body of hers until she taught those legs to walk. And she not only taught them to walk, she taught them to run. And she not only taught them to run, she taught them to run fast, so fast, so that she became a gold medal Olympic running star. Yes, when everybody else said it was impossible, the little girl didn't. She was able to overcome this. But because we're born in sin and shaped in iniquity, we have a tendency to look at the dark side of life, to the cynical and the negative side of life. Sure, life has its problems. Sure, there's death. But you'd be surprised how many people are born every day. It's true, people are starving. But my goodness, you ought to look on some of these tables how well some people eat. There is sickness, but there's an awful lot of health, too, in this earth. We don't have to weigh our thinking down with the dark, miserable aspects of life. It is better and healthier for us if we don't. Brother Martin Petzinger, who's on the body there at Bethel, spent 9 years in a concentration camp in Germany. And talking to him one day, he talked to me. He's an amazing thing. Here he is. I think he's 78 or 79 years old. I said, "What is it that made you stand in the concentration camp?" And he said, "Dan," he says, "you got to have a reason to live." He says, we have a reason to live. We are Jehovah's vindication. Jehovah's given us a work. Jehovah put us here in the concentration camp as a field service. We cannot die, he says. We got to live. I said, my goodness, I could see, without him even telling, just to see him talk that way. He had a ministry. He had a mission to fulfill. He must never say die. He had a purpose to live. Our purpose in life. Then he tells us, he says, "Dan, how important is this? Father with two sons doesn't know Jehovah, doesn't know the sanctification of Jehovah's name, doesn't know the kingdom. The father of the two sons sees every day 120 people killed or die in these prisons. And soon, he says, the morbidity comes on you and you lose the will to live. And one day, he says, the father grabs the hands of his two sons and deliberately they walk to the electric fence, and together they grab the fence, and 3 of them are electrocuted. Why? Because they have no will to live. They have no hope. They don't know the living God, Jehovah. They don't know His purpose. They do not believe. In the spiritual sense, For example, there was Judas Iscariot. For whatever reason he betrayed the living Christ, he did it. But he gave up on life and hanged himself. He didn't throw himself at the mercies of God, on the mercies of God, but he simply gave up. He lost all. You take the Apostle Peter, denied the living Christ 3 times. He went away and wept bitterly over it. But he did not give up. When it was all over, he remained true and faithful as an apostle. He had that do not give up spirit. Don't lose heart spirit. He had the trust, that conviction, that determination not to give in. You find, because the flesh, that sinful flesh, wants us to stop, wants us to quit. And then there is, of course, the spirit of the world, Satan, the devil, and everybody else wants us to quit. But not Jehovah, not His people, not His organization. But if you get this spirit, this confidence working in you, it's a beautiful force to have. Did you remember reading in the Watchtower, February 15, 1981 issue? There was this woman, the Catholic woman that went to church. She was very devout. She prayed all the images. But she didn't trust the priest. The priest didn't behave himself very well, and she said that her prayers were not answered. She was very, very disappointed with the church, so she left. But it was hard. Food was hard to come by. I believe this was in Czechoslovakia or in Poland. I'm not sure where the experience took place because the Watchtower doesn't say. But she said she went looking through the streets for food, and she saw a sign that says, Bakery, Pekarnia. And she went and knocked on the door, and a woman came to the door, and she says, do you have any bread for sale? And the woman says, oh, this bakery was closed long time ago. We just forgot to take the sign down. And she looked at the woman, and she realized that the woman was hungry. So she said, come on in. She says, I'll give you something to eat. The woman went in, and on the table, there was a Bible. And the Catholic woman says, is this a Bible? And she says, yes. Oh, she says, you don't know how I want to serve God. And the woman in this house is one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And she starts a study with this Catholic woman. The woman with her 3 children come into the truth. They're all baptized. The only problem is she has a husband that doesn't love God. He chases her with a cleaver, wants to kill her. By the grace of God, she escapes. And then he tells her, he says, it's either the home or Jehovah, but not home and Jehovah. She chose Jehovah. She took her children with her. What did she do? What would you do with 3 children? This is what amazes me. This woman went out and she said she read Hebrews 13:5. With my whole heart I have trusted Jehovah and His assuring words. What were those words? I will by no means leave you or by any means forsake you. This woman says, I believe those words so much that I went into full-time work as a pioneer. And she joined the full-time work. She and her children went into the full-time work. They grew up. 22 years later, she sends the children back to her father to see if they could locate the father. They did. He stopped his drinking. And they witnessed to him, and he comes into the truth. And on April 4, 1971, he is baptized. Today, the sister is a happy grandmother with 4 grandsons, 2 granddaughters. She has her husband with her. Amazing. What conclusion can we reach? The woman never gave up. She trusted to Jehovah, the living God. She had the faith and the strength to carry on, and God did not forsake her. I know how it is. In our own congregation one time, the presiding overseer, a brilliant man. I never saw any man in my life, even to today, that could take a bunch of brothers, inactive, bring them together, reactivate them, and really cause a congregation to grow as this brother did. He's a lovely brother. One day outside of the Kingdom Hall, he stands and he says, Dan, they put me in administration, Dan. He said, I've been promoted. They want me to go to Chicago for a show in Chicago. And he said, should I go? And I said, stay home if you know what's good for you. But he went. And when he went into his hotel room that they provided for him, there was a woman waiting there, not his wife. Beautiful woman, but he had the strength to leave. But he thought upon this, and the next time he went, he took up living with this woman. He was disfellowshipped from God's congregation, but the point of this was his wife. She comes to the elders. She came to us. And she says, shall I get a divorce? What shall I do? Believe me, if I ever have felt helpless in my life, it was then. What are you going to tell a woman? The woman says, I love him. He's my husband. I won't give him up. What shall I do? Well, we prayed over that long and hard. And no matter what you said, it looked like helpless. 1, 2, 3 years went by. 5, 6, 7, 8 years go by. And the children are growing up, but she is still faithful to that man. Worthless soul. And then one day, what happens? Into the Kingdom Hall comes the man. Sits in the back row. Everybody just about fell out. That's the last thing in the world that we thought. He sits in the back row and he says, I want to come back into the truth. He says, would you help me? I said, it's a good start. So he was helped. A couple of years later, lo and behold, he's been reinstated. And would you believe today, he's back with his wife and his children, and they're in Florida, and he's an elder in the congregation today. Impossible? Oh, yes, to some, to the human, but not to a person who has this faith. This woman I must tell you this because it was so beautiful to see the strength, the conviction of this woman to believe her husband and that would come back to her. And no doubt Jehovah blessed her. When the man showed a little change of heart, there was a blessing and he came back in. How many times our brothers have tried to find property, to buy land for kingdom halls or assembly halls, and we're not able to find anything. They go back, they pray, they beg, they do about everything that they possibly can, and still nothing turns up. But they must do what? Not give up. And then suddenly, what do you know? Here's property turns up. It's a choice piece of property. And we see this happening over and over again. In one place, our brothers bought a piece of property way back in the woods. Lonely road. They built the Kingdom Hall, and as soon as they had built it, they put a for sale sign on it. Why? Well, nobody was passing there anyway, and it was too small. And the sign was up there for the longest time, and then they gave up hope, and they took the sign down. They said, what are we going to do with the building? So all the elders got together one Sunday, and they came to the Kingdom Hall and sat down and prayed. And while they were praying, a knock came on the door, and they all looked at each other. They said, my goodness, what's this? It reminded me of this little girl, when Peter came and knocked on the door, and she opened the door. She saw Peter. Instead of welcoming Peter in, she slammed the door in his face. She didn't believe it was him. She realized he was supposed to be in prison. But lo and behold, when this elder came to the door, he stood there, and the man says, oh, did you sell the building? I see the for sale sign is not up. And he says, no, we didn't sell the building. He says, who are the owners? And he didn't know what to say. He got tongue-tied. After all, here's a buyer standing before him. They were praying for a buyer, wondering what to do. When one appears, he doesn't know what to do with him. But lo and behold, they invited the man in, and the man bought the hall. But we must hang in there. We must not lose heart. In one place, not too far away, our brothers were buying a piece of property, and the city council, they had a great big football star as on this city council. And his home was right near where the Kingdom Hall was supposed to be built. And he sat on the city council. And when all the councilmen saw him there, and he said, "No, no way will Jehovah's Witnesses have this piece of property. Not if I'm living here." Our brother's heart just went down, sagged. And at the moment when they least suspected what happened, the city attorney stood up. He said, "Gentlemen, before you act hastily," he says, "let me remind you that these are Jehovah's Witnesses that you're talking to. And if you say no, I want to say to you that they always litigate. And once more, they always win." And he says, we got the ball, we got the grounds. At a time when they thought they were not going to get it. They had this great big football star. Means nothing. God can cause the wrath of the wicked to praise Him. What moved that man to say that, we still don't know. But there he was. 1927, the society was looking for a place to build a factory. And they found a fine piece of property there. Only somebody, a big firm, came in there and outbidded them. And we felt very sick at heart. We moved to where we built the now present 117 Adams Street building. We built this 8-story building there. But the other people, when they went to build on that property that we desired so much, what did they find? They found there was no foundation. They had to put 1,100 pilings there, 90 feet into the ground, and fill them with cement. Had we bought the property and had to do that, we'd have gone broke. But they bought the property, they put the pilings in, they built the beautiful building. 50 years later, we bought it from them. And it's a lovely building. But we must not, brothers. We're dealing with God, the universal sovereign, who sets one up and brings another down. If you only knew how close Jehovah is to you, my brothers, we'd walk like giants on this earth, but humbly so. Because our God is a living God. He's a marvelous God. And He's choosing the desirable things, the choice things of the nations, the precious things. And it's precious indeed. What are we going to do when we find ourselves in desperate situations? Even the best of us get into trouble from time to time, or we know of people who are in trouble, bad trouble. Now this illustration of the widow and the bad judge is for such kind of people. She is seeking justice. We may wonder now, how can that parable be of help to us? Let's study it and see what this parable, the way this woman acts. First thing this woman does is think. And so often when we get into trouble, we stop thinking. We should do our best thinking, and what happens? We stop thinking. This woman thought her problem through and through. Sometimes when we're in trouble, we talk to everybody who can't do anything for us. We tell everybody about our problem, but the person who should hear it. But not this woman. She says, I'm going to go to that judge, and he's going to give me justice. I know it, and I'm not going to stop until he does. And this should teach us a lesson. So why complain? If our troubles are medical, let's go to a doctor. If they're legal, seek an attorney. If they're family problems, go to a father or the elders. But why just spread problems around or talk to people who can't help you? This is what the widow woman did, is to look to someone who could help her. She wanted justice, and the only one who could help her was a judge. Have another look at this parable, and let us get the impact of its message. The widow kept coming, says one translation. Another one says, she went to the judge again and again. Grant me justice against my opponent. Give me justice and protection. Please protect me from the man who is trying to ruin me. And the judge himself says, True, I care nothing for God or man, yet because this widow troubles me, because this widow annoys me, because this widow bothers me, because this widow is a nuisance, I will avenge her. I will vindicate her. I will grant her justice. I will protect her. Why? Because by her continually coming, she wearied the judge to stop her from plaguing me with her endless visits. The Lord says, Did you not note what this dishonest judge said to himself? Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find on earth such men who believe in him? The search here is for true faith, persistent faith, not some superficial passing gesture. We find this, their faith, the faith of many people is lacking. It needs building up. And that is why they give up so easily and so quickly. So think, pray, trouble God with your prayers. Become real brothers in your prayers. Let's go back to that illustration. Note, the woman did not leave everything to prayer, and neither should we. The woman set out a strategy that she would continue praying until God would answer her. And that is the way we must be. Our part is not to lose heart in Jehovah's promises. We must not allow our hearts to sag, our arms to droop, and not allow our legs to get wobbly. We are not the kind that shrink back, but the kind that have faith to the surviving of the soul. In the period of Jesus' darkest hour, he was reviled, he was persecuted, he was spat upon, he was insulted. His friends deserted him, his apostles fled, he was alone. But one thing he never did was lose heart. Father, why have you forsaken me? But he never gave up, and we must not. Up to the very end, he trusted into Jehovah. Jesus could have very easily cried out, Father, don't forgive these people because they're not worth it. But instead he says, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Jesus is telling us that when all things look black, not to give in, not to lose heart. He is our way, our truth, and our life. He is the light of the world. Follow him, and you'll never lose heart. You'll win that grand prize of all prizes, everlasting life. Think, pray penetratingly. Prepare a program with a strategy. And let the lesson of the widow before that tough judge help you to never lose heart. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Sidlick. I know you feel sure by that applause how much we deeply appreciate your being with us and giving those fine discourses.